Hello everybody, the Anthem VIP demo was this last weekend and I played, well, as much of it as I could. I previously have put up a video kind of going over a few of those issues that they were having this last weekend, and I will rediscuss some of those in this video, but overall this is going to be my general impressions of what I thought about Anthem and how I feel about the game, and am I looking forward to it or not. Also, maybe, this will give you a good idea of whether or not you should pick up the game, and I'm going to try to be as objective with my thoughts as possible, but of course we're dealing with a lot of subjectivity of, whether I like something and you don't, or vice versa. So let's jump right in with reviewing the issues and getting that elephant out of the room immediately. So starting on Friday when the VIP demo opened, you couldn't log into the demo. It was just like connection issues one after another. They didn't have a queue set up, so you couldn't just queue in and be like, okay, well, in 20 minutes it's going to let me in. I'll wait until then. And you had to keep like spamming the enter button on PC to get into the freaking game, and eventually it would let you in. And at first, once it did let you in, you're like, okay, cool. I set my options, subtitles, everything. Okay, cool. Select my voice for my character, am I male or female, essentially. And then you select that and it loops. It would loop the same option menu over and over again. And eventually, it would let you into the game after they got their servers working. This was after at least an hour of this process. But once you were in the game, you're in Fort Tarsus, which is your main base. We'll talk about that in a bit. And you would go through the little mission thing where you're talking to somebody and you're learning a little bit about what's going on. I'm going to avoid story spoilers here, so don't worry about that. But then you would go and you would launch your mission. You'd go jump in your javelin. You would set up your mission. You go hit launch, and you're like, yes, I can't wait. I get to play the game. This is going to be fun. This is awesome. And why isn't it loading? Why am I stuck at 90%? And you would literally be on an infinite load screen. So then you would be like, ah, crap. I've been waiting for 5 minutes. It's just not loading. I've looked on the subreddit. People are also having the same issue. Okay, well, I'm gonna close my game and I'm gonna try again. So you close your game, and then of course you would have to go through that same process all over again, getting back into the game, going through, doing the mission, going over, jumping into your suit, then launching the mission, and then stuck again. And this happened pretty much most of the day on Friday. I tried for several hours to get in. I got in once on Friday afternoon-ish, and then again on Friday evening, and played a little bit with that. Saturday was a lot better. Sunday was a lot better. I played a lot more then, and that's where a lot of my thoughts are coming from. But it was no doubt that their servers had issues. As I said in my previous video, this is actually to be expected because it is a demo of the game and it is an online game. When you launch a set of servers, this happens with every online game ever, there's going to be issues because you have like thousands, and then when launch comes, millions of people logging into your game, which just because of the way the internet infrastructure works, there's really no way around it. It's gonna crash servers. It's gonna have issues. There are ways to avoid those issues, and game companies do their best in order to utilize those techniques. But at the end of the day, it should be expected that an online game that is launching where you're only playing online is going to have many issues. So expect that at launch. Expect the servers not to work on the 22nd. It will be alleviated quite a bit by the fact that they have their, play it first demo thing that they have. Basically, you can jump in on the 15th if you're an Origin Access or EA Access subscriber. You'll be able to play early. Now, that's really nice and all for the people who can do that. But the fact of the matter is, not everybody's going to do that, and that does alleviate a lot of server stress, and you can expect that to be less of an issue at launch. But at the same time, as soon as launch day hits on the 22nd, those servers are down, boy. They're not going to work for a while, so don't expect to jump in directly as the game launches, unless you're a crazy madman, in which case go ahead, because you're probably hyped for this game, and you're not going to really have those issues affect you that much. For me, I'm out of town. I get back on the 23rd, so I'm looking forward to coming in the next day and being like, okay, cool, the servers are back up and working. And during the weekend, all of these issues provoked an update from BioWare's head of live service. So he put out a blog saying like, Oh, wow, that was rocky. Like this is probably the most impressive thing about all of this, is that BioWare was incredibly open about all of this. They came out and they were very communicative, and they apologized, and they're like, here's what's going on, and here's what we're discussing, essentially. So in this case, we're talking about the head of live service, the guy who understands all of this the most and what's going on here, coming out, putting out a blog and saying, look, here's the issues. There were platform connection issues. People couldn't get into the game. There were entitlement issues, not with the players. I mean, players are always entitled. No, but they meant with like the demo being entitled to an account. So in order for you to access the account, you have to have it on your account, and there were issues with that happening. And then of course there was the infinite load screens, and they were just honest with that one. They're like, look, this is occurring for some players, and especially when going from Fort Tarsus to an expedition in order to launch a mission. And in their isolated cases that they saw during internal testing, they were like, it's going to be resolved, right? They resolved it. But unfortunately, that problem persisted, and it was made worse in real world circumstances. And that has to do with various different issues, such as like the different player ISPs and networks and stuff like that. So there were some big issues going on with the infinite load screens, and they're like, this probably won't get fixed during this weekend. But they are making fixes during this next weekend. I'll talk about that later. So essentially, they put out this update, and they're like, we're sorry that these were happening. We're sorry that people were getting rubber banding issues, for instance. And in order to apologize for that, they are giving everybody who participated in the VIP demo an exclusive vinyl at launch. Vinyls are like customization pieces for your javelins. They are basically a decal that you can put on. They are, each vinyl is like a different set of colors, and they're really cool. They do different patterns and whatnot to go on to your javelin, and you can mix and match the vinyls. We'll talk about the customization later, but you can mix and match the vinyls with different colors on your javelin, and it's really freaking cool. And the fact that they're giving us a vinyl at launch is like, okay, cool, I can accept that. I would have accepted if they were like, hey, we'll last the demo through Monday, but that wasn't the reason they didn't do that, I believe, is because that wasn't going to be that productive, because a lot of the issues were going to persist through the entire demo until they brought it down and were able to fix it over the week. So overall, getting a vinyl at launch is cool, and the fact that I got to even play is okay enough for me. And of course, after the weekend was over, BioWare posted a blog with a weekend summary, basically going over everything that had happened and thanking players for all of the crazy amounts of feedback, and that they're working really, really hard to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen at launch. They also addressed a lot of the things that have been fixed for this upcoming open demo. So this last weekend was the VIP demo, which only people were like pre-orders or had certain codes could play. And then the open demo is this next weekend, which means everybody can play. Regardless of your platform, you can jump on, PC or console, it doesn't matter. You could jump on and you get to try the game all weekend for what is there in the demo. We'll talk about the demo content in just a moment. But the issues that are being addressed and have been addressed for the open demo are the entitlement bugs. So those will be gone and squashed. They updated server performance to make sure that rubber banding doesn't happen for some players. They fixed or fixes in general for the infinite loads, but there might still be some of that, so don't necessarily expect it to be fully gone. So don't be surprised essentially if it pops up again in limited quantities, but for the most part the infinite load screen should be fixed. And there are also issues that were, people were trying to unlock different javelins and those weren't updating on the account. Those should be fixed. And of course, being able to log in and having bugs associated with that have also been fixed. Outside of that, you got to remember that the demo itself is an old build of the game, and many of the issues that we were experiencing in the demo have already been fixed, and including thousands, according to them, of fixes leading up to launch that will already be in. So this means things like weapon bonuses that apply to different javelins on your weapons won't be there. You will have fixes for losing XP at the end of your missions instead of actually gaining it. There's got a ton of performance improvements. There's stability fixes. There's a social hub. There's just literally thousands of stuff that they are going to have fixed for launch. So that's good news. They went essentially into a lot of detail that they didn't have to. They were hyper communicative, which they didn't have to be, and they did a good job of keeping everybody up to date on what's going on and addressing concerns. So for me, because of all of this communication and them showing that they're doing their best to make sure that the launch is stable, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see that launch will be a lot better than at least the demos are. And for the most part, I expect the servers to have issues at launch. That's an expectation I have with any game that is online, but for the most part, I think that people will be able to jump in and play with a short amount of time waited, compared to this last weekend where it was up to like 6 or 7 hours before people could even get into the game in a lot of cases, and that's not good at all. So now that the issues of the VIP demo are out of the way and we've addressed those, I don't really feel like they are crippling issues. I think that the issues definitely suck, but they were communicative and they've since addressed a lot of that, and I'm totally okay with that. So with that said, let's jump into what I thought about the actual game. I personally feel like the game is so much fun to play. I can't really speak to the plot, and I can't talk about the stuff that I got to play in the exclusive alpha a while back, but for the most part, I can say that the gameplay is completely solid. Being able to jump around and fly around the world like Iron Man is so satisfying. You know, you're flying around and there's a big group of enemies and you come smashing down with like a big superhero landing where your fist hits the ground and everything around you dies, and then you pull out your weapon, you start shooting things, you use your abilities, and you're zipping around with your dashes and stuff. It's so much fun. The game is a lot of fun, and that is probably the best thing that you can say about a game, because if a game isn't fun to play, you're not going to be playing it for very long. And this game has fun in spades. Every time you jump into the open world and you start running around and shooting things, it's just a lot of fun. I saw a lot of complaints from people who hadn't played before or had played in limited quantities before that the flying felt unnecessarily restrictive. And what they mean by this is when you jump into the air and you start flying around, you have a heat bar at the bottom of your screen, and the heat goes up over time, and you can cool yourself by going through water or by nearing water, and then you can just kind of fly infinitely as long as you have some kind of water source. But for the most part, if you're like flying way up into the air and you're flying straight up, you're going to heat up a lot faster than if you're flying straight down. In fact, when you fly down, you don't generate heat at all. And these people's concerns about it feeling restrictive, it's not that it is restrictive, it's that they haven't found the nuance of the flying yet. Because once you find out that flying near any water surface, which means you can fly real low to the ground and fly over like ponds and stuff, will keep you flying infinitely. Once you start doing that and you start flying through waterfalls, and when you need, or when you're able to, you fly down instead of up, and you only fly up when you really need to get up high, then you start finding that you can fly for as long as you really want to, and good pilots will be able to do that in a manner that allows them to fly where they're not having to constantly hit the ground and wait for their heat to recharge and then go up. I saw a lot of players, especially on Twitch, who are streaming the game, doing just that. They fly around, their heat fills up, they hit the ground, they're like, bleh, and now I have to wait, and now I can fly again. And it's like, they just didn't understand the nuance of flight. And this is something that even I haven't gotten. I got a lot better towards the end of the demo, but initially, yeah, you're flying around and you're hitting walls, and it's weird. It is a weird control scheme that you're not necessarily used to, because you're not used to flying around like this in a game like, you know, Iron Man. Also, the other problem is it's just throwing you in the game at level 10, and there is no tutorial. You just have to learn how to fly on your own. I, again, can't talk about what I played in the alpha, but the tutorial you should expect will walk you through the game in a way that allows you to learn how to fly and learn the nuance of the game in a lot better way than you would expect something like this just throwing you in at level 10 doing. So I'm not too concerned about it for new players, but I am concerned that new players jumping into the demo this next weekend will get really frustrated with the flying initially because they won't have the nuance down. They'll be flying into walls, but hopefully the cool factor of being able to fly keeps them going, so they do end up learning that as they play. And also, on top of all this, you have a lot of tactical nuance with the ability to fly around and dash around. Because you have a dash button, you can dash around the battlefield, you can get in and out of where you need to be, you can seek cover, you can retreat, you can jump into the fray with your dash buttons, you can even fly around and hover, and being able to do so allows you to shoot at things, and it's just all of this stuff leads to a large skill ceiling for the game. That doesn't mean that it's going to be really hard to play, and people who are really good at it are going to dominate, the PvE aspect of this, because there is no PvP in the game, at least right now. I don't think there ever will be, but right now it is a PvE only game. So the people who are significantly good at the game are going to be way better than the average player because the skill cap is so high. Again, this is due to all the nuance within the traversal of the game, being able to dash around and shoot and use your abilities in special ways. I haven't even talked about skill combos yet. We'll talk about that in a minute, but the interesting thing here to me is that the game features a difficulty system similar to Diablo 3. That's the best way that I can put it. Don't let that, dissuade you at the moment. Let me talk about that. Let me dive into it. So initially, when you start the game, you can play on easy, medium, or hard, just like most games. The harder difficulty you go up, the more chance you have for higher quality drops. Of course, the enemies get a lot harder. You go up and your enemies are getting a lot more health, a lot more damage, and your stuff is staying the same, except for your chance to get really good drops. This also is shown in the UI during the demo if you go digging for it, where once you hit level 30, which is the max level, and you've upgraded your javelin to be a higher quality. So the way you do this is you just get better gear, and your javelin works the same way as gear qualities does. So, there's like white, green, blue, purple, orange and yellow or something like that. Once you get up to the legendary spots with your javelin, you can change the difficulty at level 30 to be much harder. Think of this like torment levels in Diablo 3. And as you go up in difficulty, the item chance the chance for really good items to drop goes up, but so does the difficulty of the enemies. What this causes is a gameplay loop similar to that which you would find in Diablo 3. You're getting better and better loot. You're able to withstand the damage you're able to do more damage to the enemies in ways that allow you to go up in difficulty and actually be able to accomplish the content at those higher difficulties, which is going to get you better loot. And it gets into a gameplay loop of you're getting your sets, you're getting your awesome items, you're doing the high level repeatable content or just the end game content in a way that is increasing in difficulty and is more and more rewarding each time you go up in difficulty. This is super exciting as a player who enjoys that kind of gameplay loop. I am really looking forward to being able to do that in Anthem, and the fact that the combat has nuance to it, as in you with a high skill cap will be able to be really good at this game, means that content is going to be really fun to do with a group of friends that are also good at the game. I am looking forward to that. That doesn't mean that you have to do it as a group. You can do it solo, but doing it as a group obviously is going to be the best way to do that kind of content. And all of that said, I, again, haven't really even touched on the combo system yet. So the skill combo system works in a very similar way that you would expect in Mass Effect. So for example, if you have an ability detonator, now you can get these ability detonators with any class. You can get primers with any class, but if you have a detonator, you are specifically looking for people who are casting primers, and primers can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. The Storm Javelin, we'll talk about the javelins later. The Storm Javelin has the ability to use like an ice blast or an ice storm, and that primes the target. It freezes the target and it primes them for a combo. So if you're playing the Ranger, you can use your grenade ability to detonate that primed combo target, which does an insane amount of damage. Targets that will take, quite a bit of investment with your skills going into them and using a lot of ammo on them, they will die extremely quickly when you simply just use an ability combo on them. Kind of the same way as it works in Mass Effect, and it feels really good to do in Anthem because you've got certain characters who are really good at priming and certain characters that are really good at detonating. You know, for example, the Interceptor has a couple primers that they can do. The Interceptor is a very fast, mobile character, but they also have primarily the ability to kind of dash around and detonate things with their melee attacks. Whereas the Storm is more of a primer. They have more priming abilities than they do detonating, and overall the other characters are good at kind of both. So you just kind of have to bring a group together that is really good at detonating things versus priming them. The other thing to consider here is that different kinds of elemental damage, which they have in this game, do good against very specific types of enemies. So like fire and acid, for example, do really well against armor, whereas electric and ice do really good against shield. So when you're priming and detonating, if you're detonating based on those criteria, you know, you're detonating a fire combination, you're going to be doing a lot of damage against armor, whereas if you're detonating an ice combination, you're going to be doing a lot of damage against shields. So there's some really cool nuance that comes in with that. And again, if you've played Mass Effect, you kind of understand how this system works. And especially if you played Mass Effect multiplayer, you really understand how important this is at the high end of those kind of gameplay experiences. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we're able to pull off at max level with, you know, specific sets and having really good gear, really good items to be able to combo that. In ways, from what I can see with the high level weapons and the way those interact with abilities and gear, it reminds me of how certain weapons work in Borderlands. You know, you have weapons in Borderlands that feel really good to use and have really cool specific effects on them. I guess you can also equate this to Destiny, for example. If you've played, you know, Destiny 2 recently, certain weapons have different kind of effects on them that work a lot like this as well, like legendary effects. And the way that this will all combo in with the combo system is looking to be very promising and very rewarding for players who really want to engage in the end game of Anthem. So now that some of the gameplay talk is out of the way, let's talk about the story. Because after all, this is a BioWare game, and BioWare games feature heavily on story, or at least they should traditionally. Well, this is a game that also features heavily on story, and you can play through it completely solo or with people. It's up to you. So if you're just into this game because you want to fly around like Iron Man and witness the story of Anthem, then it's going to be just fine to be able to do that. You're not going to have to jump in and do all these crazy cool endgame things unless you are interested in that kind of gameplay loop. So the story is presented in a different kind of way than a lot of other BioWare stuff. You're not necessarily having a huge amount of interactions with the characters. Like your character has a voice and is talking. For example, the male character is voiced by Matt Mercer. So if you're familiar with him, you are familiar with his voice and you know he does a fantastic job. Your character does talk with the other characters in the game. And every now and again, you do have some dialogue choices, but they don't really seem to affect much from my experience. This is not, from my experience, again, a game that you're going to get to the end of the game and based on the choices that you've made are going to have a heavy impact on the end of the game. I think it is a rather narrow narrative experience. You are going through a very set out experience, but that experience should be high quality from what I have experienced thus far. There's some really cool sci-fi stuff going on, and for the most part, the story is told in a way that is really engaging and really cool. But there's a little bit of Destiny-isms going on, where, for example, you get a mission, you go out on what's called an expedition, right? You open the map and essentially you fly out with your javelin instead of being in Fort Tarsis, which is like in the main mission area where you're talking to NPCs that are unarmored and whatnot. And you fly out, you go do your mission. And as you're doing your mission, the NPCs are talking to you. And sometimes you're sitting there and you're defending a point and a bar is moving up on your map or on your screen and you're waiting for the bar to fill up. And then once you've done that, you can move on and go do other things. That was the general gist of a lot of the narrative parts of the game where people were talking to you as you were fighting enemies, and that's cool. It keeps the gameplay loop moving forward. It feels like you are always engaged in the action, and the game isn't too heavy on the dialogue as you might expect from a game like Dragon Age or Mass Effect, where there's parts of the game where you're talking to people for like 2 or 3 hours before you go engage back in combat. And I think that's totally fine, that kind of gameplay. Obviously, I love it. I've done playthroughs of Dragon Age and Mass Effect on the channel, and I really love those games. Those are my kind of games. But that isn't really what I experienced thus far from the story in Anthem. That doesn't mean that the story is bad or that it is not engaging and that you don't have any choice in it, but there is the feeling of this is more of an action story than it is a in-depth RPG where you're going to be talking to characters for hundreds of hours before, talking or going into combat. That's just not the case here. But it feels really nice. I like the story, and I'm looking forward to what comes out of the interesting characters that they've set up in the story thus far. It's fun to play through, just like the gameplay is, and I think that makes a really big difference. And on top of all of this going on with the story and the gameplay, you have a crazy customization system. This comes in the form of vanity customization and actual customization of your character as far as gear is concerned, because you only have 2 weapon slots and you have to choose, what kind of weapons do you use? Use an assault rifle, a machine pistol, a sniper rifle, a grenade launcher, a shotgun. You're choosing between the items you're using to make a build, and obviously that will depend heavily on the end game items you're getting. I'm sure based on certain support items you're getting, you'll use different weapons and whatnot. But you are upgrading your character as you would expect in a BioWare RPG in ways that are very choice driven. You are choosing how you want to build your character as you level up, and you get new items, and you're equipping those items on your javelins. And these javelins there's 4 different kinds of javelins, and each of them have their own loadouts that you can customize, and you can switch between them. So don't think of it as you're gonna start the game and you're like, okay, I'm going to play as a Storm Javelin or as a Colossus or whatever. And then that is what you are from 1 to 30, and you never touch any of the other javelins. And then finally you get to end level or max level, and you're like, oh, we really need a Colossus, and you have to re-level. It's not like that. You're switching between the different javelins, and you're getting gear for those javelins. So there is a reward loop for each of the javelins as you play them, because you're getting specific gear for those things. But for the most part, you're not really having to re-level your character, which I find enticing, because it means that I'm not having to worry about going back through the content all over again to just get a new javelin up. With that said, you can, by the way, jump in on missions that friends are doing that you've already done. So if a friend is working on a mission and you've played a couple more hours than they have, and you're like, oh, you're online. Okay. Hey, can I come play with you? And they're like, oh, awesome. They can invite you to a group, they can launch their missions, and you can join in with them and experience that again with them. So I think that is a really cool thing that is there. But with the customization system on top of what's going on, the vanity thing is really cool as well. So you can customize your javelin in crazy ways. They essentially have a picker where you can pick materials for different parts of your javelin, which, by the way, you can switch out pieces on your javelin to make them look different, like the arms or the helmet or the chest piece or the legs. And you get to choose what those look like vanity-wise. And once you've kind of mixed and matched the way that you want your javelin to look, you can change the materials on different pieces for those. I think there is 6 or 7 different kinds of pieces entirely. I don't remember exactly, but you can change them out with different materials like metallic materials or fabrics and make it look the way that you want it to look. And then you can customize the colors on all of that as well. You can add custom colors. You can do whatever color you want. This isn't Destiny where you're getting these shades and you're putting these shaders on your gear, and then that's the end of that shader, and now you got to go collect more of it. No, this is, you look at your character and you're like, I think my javelin should be pink today. And you come up with a variety of different pinks on your own or based on their color that they already have selected. And you can change the materials of those pinks. So maybe you have a metallic pink and it is shiny and it is reflecting some of the world around it. And then you have like a coarse fabric or a fake leather look to another piece of your gear. You can change everything, and it's amazing how much customization is here. We haven't even seen the pilot creator yet. So when you actually start the game, you create a pilot and you make them look the way that you want them to look. And that is also a part of customization. But the javelin customization is obviously the big thing here that they want you to focus on. So there is a set of vinyls, which are basically decals you can put on your characters and change those out as well. And it is crazy the amount of customization you can do. I'm really looking forward to individualizing my javelin versus everybody else's. And I have a feeling it's going to be really hard to find another javelin that looks like yours because of the amount of options available. And finally, I wanted to talk about the different javelins in the game. So the javelins are your mech suits that you're riding around in and you're flying around in, and they each have different kind of properties. So first you have the Ranger. The Ranger is like your jack of all trades. They're using crazy rockets and a lot of weapon damage. They can do a lot of stuff. They're not really specialized in one thing or another, but they do a lot of damage, and they are just generally fun to play. They're probably for your average player. Then you have the Colossus, which is the big tank character. You got a shield that you can pull out, and you're like, hiding behind your shield, shooting and sucking in a ton of damage so your other people don't die on your squad, which is always good. You can even have a taunt where you essentially like scream at a range of characters in front of you in like a cone, and they'll start attacking you, and you get benefits from that. And it's really, really cool to play the Colossus. You feel big and powerful, and you're super tanky. You're not going to die very easy. Then you have the Interceptor, which is really squishy, but you're dashing around. They're super quick and agile, and you're basically Genji, I think is the best way to put it. You're dashing in, and you're dealing a ton of melee damage. You're dashing back out, and your melee attacks actually help combo. They are detonators, which is really nice, and that means that you could do a lot of damage. And then finally, you have the Storm, who is more of a caster. They're kind of sitting back. They're doing a lot of abilities and doing a lot of primers, and you're being able to detonate off of them. Think of the Storm as essentially one of the different kinds of characters in Mass Effect that use their biotic abilities. Various different classes do that, so I'm not just going to name one of them, but for the most part, most of the biotic classes play a lot like the Storm does. So if you're familiar with Mass Effect, you'll kind of understand that crossover, that reference there. So with these 4 different javelins, you can build your squad however you want. You could go forward Colossus if you really want to, or you can go with more of a balanced team, doing interceptors and maybe a Storm and a Ranger, and maybe you bring a Colossus, maybe you don't. That's completely up to you. But the fact that you can switch out between these and you're getting different gear for each of them, a lot of the weapons do share, so don't worry about that. But for the most part, they have different kind of support gear, different abilities you can equip. You're not just stuck with the 2 that you have and the ultimate that you have. You can switch those out and get different ones. But each of the different javelins do have their kind of unique idea for an ultimate. So the one that you get for the Colossus by default is like a giant rocket launcher thing, or like a big cannon, I think is a better way to put it. You pull out this big cannon and you use it and you like blow everything up. The Ranger locks onto a ton of targets with their rockets and just like mass missiles them. The Interceptor jumps in and just starts killing things with crazy swords, and again, you feel like Genji while doing it. So if you're familiar with Overwatch, you know what that's like with his ultimate ability. And then finally with the Storm, you're just like throwing like huge giant abilities down on people. You feel like actually a really good way to give an idea of how the Storm feels in my eyes from what I've played of it. You feel like an Archon from StarCraft. You're just like casting like big psionic storm abilities or different kind of like freeze abilities, and that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to do that and to feel like a really powerful caster from the back line. And the fact that the game has so much variety in how you can play and how you customize your character and what abilities and weapons you're taking means that overall it is a lot of fun to dive into those systems, jump into the game, and play through it. Even if the story ends up being pretty mediocre, at the end of the day, we're getting two things. We're getting a game that is super fun to play, which is important, and you're getting a game that is set in a new IP, a new world that we've never explored, and there's at least going to be something cool there for us to take a look at. And with that, I think that the game is definitely comes highly suggested from me. I'm really looking forward to jumping into the game at release and jumping in on the open demo and playing some more. And I think that the game is going to be really cool over time too. The way that they want to update the game and add more content to it really excites me. And just, seeing what they have now and then imagining what a year of community feedback would look like, I think the game is going to be fantastic in the future. And the problem to me is that it is going to be competing for my time because the Division 2 comes out on the 15th of March. This comes out on the 22nd of February, and I'm going to have like 3 weeks to jump into the Anthem and play before I go, okay, I've completed a lot of the end-game content. Now time to go play the Division and do the exact same thing. And then Anthem will probably get an update, and I jump back in on Anthem and play that. And I'm going to go back and forth between those games because I enjoy both of those kinds of games quite a lot. I think the Division is different than Anthem in pretty significant ways, and the Division has its own core audience that I'm excited to jump back in and play with because I do like that game a lot. But I think Anthem isn't trying to compete with anybody. It's not really trying to compete with Destiny or the Division or any other kind of game like that. It's just trying to be its own game, and it takes some of those ideas from those games and does something different with it. And in my opinion, it very much succeeds on those things. And I am, again, really looking forward to playing. So if you've been able to play Anthem and jump in and enjoy it, let me know what you think of it in the comments. I'm really interested in what other people are feeling on the game. Did you have a lot of issues in the VIP demo? Were you able to get in and play? Or have you not played yet and you're going to jump in on the public demo this next weekend? Again, I'm really interested in this stuff. Are you even interested in these kind of games? Or are you kind of sick and tired of them and you want something different? Because frankly, I think Anthem is definitely different now that I've played it, and I can see that it is, again, trying to go for something new. But with all of that being said, I'm really looking forward to the open demo this next weekend, and we shall see you guys next time.